I have your permission to record, upload, and use this in perpetuity.
Yes.
Welcome to the Party Pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 402. I'm talking with Pat Dixon. Pat is running for governor of Texas. Pat has also had various duties with the Libertarian Party over the years. He's a long been an activist for many years. How are you, Pat?
Doing all right. Good to talk to you.
Pat, can you tell us exactly, all the hats you've worn over the years while involved with the Libertarian Party?
It'll take a while. Well, you can go to my website. I'll start with that. patdixon.org, PATDIXON.org. So a lot of my background is there. By the way, the website is a bit of a work in progress. So as the campaign progresses, there should be more content. But I can start with being a Libertarian Party member starting in 1984, but really not active till I got to Virginia in the early 2000s. I got involved in the Richmond, Virginia area with some Libertarian Party campaigns. Actually, I forgot, when I was in Arizona, I helped with some ballot access work. Ernie Hancock was doing some things over there. But when I got to Texas, the Travis County Libertarian Party started attending meetings. I became the county chair in 2002, and then in 2004 became state chair, and I did that for 10 years. During that period, I served 2 terms on the Libertarian Party National Committee. I was chair of something called the Libertarian, I'm forgetting the acronym, the Libertarian State Leadership Alliance, where all the state chairs would have an annual conference, and I was in charge of that. And then I ran for city council here in Lago Vista, and I served 2 terms. So those were my first campaigns actually getting elected, and since then I've run for several other offices.
Yes. So now you're going to run for governor in 2026. The current governor of Texas is Greg Abbott, who has been in office since, he's been in since 2014 now, I think.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, he shut down the state in 2020, and he's still managed to get reelected by the people here. Anyway, do we know who's running for the blue team?
There are several candidates. Probably the leading candidate is Gina Hinojosa, who is a state representative. Andrew White is the son of Mark White, who served as governor some time ago. I'm sure there were other people seeking the Democratic nomination. So at the moment, probably Hinojosa is the leading candidate.
Chris Bell and some guy named Bobby Cole. Looks like these people.
Yeah, Chris Bell. That's right. He ran for governor previously, so this is not his first time.
Hinojosa has the most endorsements by far.
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't know these Pete Chambers and Mark Golaby, some other activists on the red side. So it's hard to say where this will end up. I suppose it'll. Abbott got 66% in the primary, and then got a good percentage in the general election. So I don't know what's going to happen here, but what's your goal here, Pat? Do you think you could get 3 or 4%?
Perhaps. So we're not delusional here. We know what we're up against. Of course, miracles can happen. When Donald Trump came down the escalator, I said, well, he's going to fail. It's going to be Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio or somebody, and he ended up president. So I think some of the goals are to grow the party, certainly to support down ballot candidates. Jesse Cowart, who's running for state representative, is an outstanding candidate. I think any way we can support other libertarian candidates, unfortunately, we're not going to have that many because of what Republicans do to us. But we will have a full statewide slate. We will have 9 libertarians on the ballot for statewide office next year, assuming they all get nominated at our state convention.
Yeah, and since they're the only ones, that's pretty much I'm not outside of president. I don't know if I've seen very many contested races in the Libertarian Party. Usually,
well, apparently there will be for Senate. Ted Brown apparently will have a challenger. One other person filed, and there may be some others, but frankly, I wouldn't have any objection to being contested for the nomination. I think it would liven up the convention, but I believe I'm the only person who filed as a libertarian.
Maybe so. Well, you were elected. You were elected to city council in Lago Vista for several years. How did that work out for you?
Well, you can see the full story on my website, patdixon.org. I include all the details of what happened there, but I'll summarize it by saying this. When I was running for the first time, a lot of people on the council were very encouraging. They said, hey, it'd be great to have you on council. When I got elected and actually did what I said I was going to do, I became their enemy. So there were a number of altercations at council meetings that I did not instigate, but I simply said, guys, I told you, this is what I'm going to do when I'm in office. I'm going to try to repeal the bed tax, which is a tax on anybody who offers lodging in Lago Vista. I'm going to try to have some realistic reforms to zoning, because the zoning regulations in Lago Vista are onerous. So a number of things like that. The result of that is the council members recruited somebody to run against me for re-election. That person won, but a year later I ran to get back on council and did get back on council. And I think that term, I had much more support. So that's the way it went.
Pat, having been served on city council, I regret to say I've not had anybody on this show to talk specifically about zoning, but I'd love to hear from you how this impacted Lago Vista, which is a pretty small town, but pretty. I think the average home price is pretty high out there. What can you tell me about that?
So I'll begin by saying I'm a libertarian. I don't like zoning. There's a book called, why am I forgetting the title of it? It's a book written about land use and how zoning has impacted cities. And in some ways, crime can be, the growth in crime can be a result of zoning laws, because what effectively zoning does is to say all the people who live in residential areas, you have to be over here. All the light industrial activity happens here. All the retail happens here. All the other commercial happens here, which means that Monday through Friday, people leave their house and go to the areas where they work, which means the residential areas are vulnerable to theft, which has been an issue with some zoning laws. So what I love about old cities that really grew organically before zoning, you can walk down the street from your house to a restaurant, to a church, to the place you work, to you can walk without, and the growth happens where naturally it should happen. So to get back to Lago Vista, people here have a sense that I have to protect my property value, and therefore I will not allow something next to me. I don't want something to impair my property value. That's very understandable, but the way Houston handles it is with property owners associations, which we have here in Lago Vista. So in some ways, I think the zoning restrictions are overkill. And I'll close with this. One of the most onerous restrictions is you cannot have a house 15 feet taller than the highest spot on your property. Meaning that any house you build in Lago Vista is going to be small unless you buy two properties and merge them and expand it sideways, or unless you get a variance, which you're not going to get unless you're politically connected. So that's one of the restrictions in Lago Vista that's rather onerous.
Yeah, I've heard so many ridiculous regulations, like this, and your fence can only be so high, signage for businesses and other stuff. And I just look at some of these city councils, and there's always some busybody. And I guess, but it does raise the question though, Pat. I don't think I want to have a slaughterhouse next to my house.
Right.
I think I'd want to have a hazardous waste incinerator next to my house. So what stops that?
Right. So again, homeowners associations or property owners associations where somebody is a developer and they say, we're going to have these streets and that can be managed and we will ensure that any kind of industrial activity isn't right in that neighborhood. That's how you can handle it. But to get, you mentioned signage, I want to bring this up. There's a very good brewery in Lago Vista. On a Friday and Saturday, I'm usually there if I'm in town. They tried to get a sign on their building because otherwise you're driving by it, you don't know what it is. Yes. It took them forever. And what they ended up with required the sign to be black during the day, which was a black sign on a blue building, which you can barely see. Now at night, they can light it up. They're allowed to light it up. So it's just nonsensical how it can take that long. Really, a reasonable improvement is to say, we want to put up a sign. If you can't tell us within 2 weeks what's wrong with it, then we're going to do it and it's approved.
Yeah, I hear stories like this all the time. It's pretty crazy, and I don't really know what the benefit is of all this. Do you have any theories on why something like this happens? Or
yeah, especially here in Lago Vista, they want to micromanage things, and their concern is if you don't tightly control it, things will look bad. Aesthetically, it won't be appealing, so people won't come to Lago Vista, or people won't buy my house because of the house next to me doesn't look good. All right. Again, I go back to homeowners associations. I think that's the right way to do it. But you consider Lago Vista doesn't have much of a commercial area. It's much more than it used to be. But if you micromanage it too much, that's a disincentive for anyone to have a business in Lago Vista. And that's why you go to Marble Falls, which really isn't much bigger in population, but there's way more commerce. So, yeah, I think people just have a sense here that we want things to never change, and so they tightly control it.
Well, and yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you can think of that's really raised up, jacked up property values artificially. Can you tell me anything like that?
Um, well, it's interesting. The property value, the biggest influence on property values here in the last 3 years has been because people who want to live in Central Texas or near Austin are finding it rather impossible to find housing. So they're coming out our way. And so finally, we're starting to fill in a lot of the vacant lots.
Yes.
So I have a lot behind my house that I bought. Actually, I have two lots that I bought. One was I bought maybe 10 years ago, reasonable price. The other one I bought 2 years ago or 3 years ago. The value of that property went up by a factor of 10 in 2 years.
Okay,
And
so
it's just because people are moving out here.
okay, so what are some of your biggest issues running for governor here? What are you going to run on, and what are you going to emphasize?
Yeah, so I'm going to start by sort of evading the question because I don't go into this saying I'm promising these three things or here's my top priorities. You don't know what the priorities are going to be in November next year, but there are a bunch of them. So for one, if you're wanting to execute somebody who's clearly innocent and you're not willing to go to the Board of Pardons and say, investigate this Robert Robertson case, consider an exoneration, the tough on crime thing is very bad when you're damaging innocent people, and I'm concerned about the rule of law. Okay. Another one is, a big issue is going to be sustainability. I talk about something called free market sustainability. What Texas is doing right now, it's not sustainable, and it's certainly not the free market. It's the state government, principally the governor's office, saying, we're going to give tax dollars to Fortune 500 companies because we think that's where jobs come from. So they're not paying for the growth. They're not paying for the demand on the water, the electric grid, schools, roads, and everything else. And our energy grid, the growth in data centers, artificial intelligence, crypto mining, that is unsustainable unless you have an answer for that. When I was on city council, what we did is we used impact fees. If you're a developer and you want to build 1,000 living unit equivalents, we are going to, that's great. We want to grow, but you have to pay for your impact. So what you pay for those 1,000 LUEs helps provide that infrastructure, or else you have to provide it yourself. So sustainability is going to be very important. Otherwise, you have the state of Texas trying to promote growth without a means to provide the water, energy, everything else that's required.
Well, certainly. What can you're mentioning? Of course, wouldn't that also, in some cases, if you have, wouldn't this also be limiting the supply of housing and causing housing to be more expensive, though? Or are you talking about data centers?
Well, not necessarily. So, new houses may require that, and that's right sizing. That's the free market. If there are people who want to come in and there is some scarcity, that's what happens in a free market. That's the right way to do it. The opposition is to have government subsidy, which is a false indicator, a false price. Now you're saying housing is cheap when it really isn't. Now, nobody wants to make housing unaffordable, of course. And some of what makes housing unaffordable are some of the, it could be zoning restrictions or other, if it's property owners having to pay taxes because the people who are causing the impact aren't paying them. Samsung is one example. There's a long legacy of Samsung not paying for their impact on growth. And you can carry that forward to many other companies in Texas. If those companies are able to thrive while paying for their impact, then people like us aren't having to pay that. And we shouldn't be.
Okay, yes. So what do you, what do you think about the highways and the roads in Texas? Because, having now been here 21 years, I've seen things change, and it's just a complete madhouse now. I mean, driving to San Antonio from Austin, for example, almost any time is horrible. What can you say about that? I mean, because that is something that's a key function of the state, and I don't think it's going to be privatized anytime soon.
Right. So that gets back to my sustainability argument. That's a sustainability issue. What is supposed to provide the funding for the roads is the fuel tax. We can argue about whether that's the best way, whether it should be a toll or a fuel tax or whatever, but fuel tax is relatively efficient. But it's not efficient when you're taking half of it and spending it on things that have nothing to do with transit tax. Then again, you get back to a false indicator of what the price is. That fuel tax should reflect the cost of transportation. So that when you're fueling up, you're saying, if things are getting tight, maybe I'm going to do what should happen in a free market. That's not what's happening with the fuel tax.
Yeah, I don't think there's so what can you do to fix that issue and get all of the fuel tax and the gas tax going to our highways?
So the governor of Texas is a relatively weak position, which is one of the reasons I can't. Greg Abbott shouldn't say this. Hosts shouldn't say this. You can't just say, "I am going to fix everything." It has to go through the legislature. I know from Huffines, who's running for comptroller, he challenged Abbott last time for the gubernatorial nomination. Huffines is pretty outspoken, and he has these billboards where he says, "I will slash taxes." Not if you're comptroller. That's not what a comptroller does. A comptroller cannot slash taxes. Maybe you can ask the legislature to do so, but they're under no obligation to do so. So the legislature ultimately needs to change policy.
Yes.
As governor, you do propose a budget, but the legislature doesn't have to pay attention to it. You can be a leader in trying to advocate for legislation and go to voters in certain districts and say, "Hey guys, tell your legislator to support this." You can do that. So ultimately, if you want to fix that, get the fuel tax to be specifically for transportation. And then everything else that you want to spend money on, you need to bring this up, because right now Greg Abbott is talking about eliminating property taxes, and I think specifically in school districts. I hear no mention of what he's doing on spending. And if you're talking about taxation without spending, then you should be ignored. Are you cutting taxes? If so, what are you cutting and spending? If you're not cutting taxes and just playing a shell game with, we're going to tax you differently, tell me why that's better.
Yeah, and I'm really wondering about, I want to see taxes as low as possible, but they seem to be proposing something that seems on the surface to be impossible. We have no state income tax. I certainly don't want one.
Right.
But now property taxes. It's just like, okay, how do you pay for all this? And they don't say it. Then just as Ayn Rand would say, blank out. This is something I've known. This seems to be kind of a movement that I hear a lot, Pat. I really wonder if there's a few big donors who are funding this, because it seems like some of these ideas, and I bet somebody who has a lot of money is pushing it.
Well, on his show in Talarico, told about the two very large conservative Christian donors that are behind nearly everything the Republican Party's trying to do, and they may be behind this effort to get Turning Point in all the high schools. So I know a lot of funding is coming from a few specific donors. Now, it's important to understand in Texas, donations are not limited. You can donate as much money as you want. It's supposed to be reported. So unlike federal elections that limit, I think the number's 3,000. Yeah. So you can be a mega donor, throw as much money, but it's supposed to be reported.
Michael Dell both decide they want to give $100 billion to Greg Abbott's campaign. They can do it.
Yep. Of course, they could give it to my campaign too.
Yeah, but now $100 million for running for governor of Texas would probably be overkill, and they could do that if they wanted to. Yeah, so yeah, they could send it your way too, Pat. I do. Yeah, that is something that's come up lately. I don't know. Ideally, I'd like to see the schools privatized, but we have them now, and I don't know what to say about that. Or clubs. I thought organizations kind of had free reign to start student clubs if they wanted to. Although I'm not opposed to Turning Point being on the public's, a Turning Point club at a high school, but I wouldn't necessarily be opposed either. Or the American fans of Javier Milei wanted to start a club at a high school. I'd say, yeah, go ahead, guys. But so what are the rules governing that, or what's going on with that?
Well, it's not entirely clear what they're proposing. So I know in the case of Dan Patrick, he says he's going to use $1 million out of his campaign funds. So I have no objection to a club. The question I have, when Greg Abbott is saying any high school that puts up a burden or an obstacle to having a club is going to be punished. That's a problem. If this club is using government property, that can be a problem. Is this a club that's off campus, or is it on campus? And if it's on campus, now Turning Point, I know there's two things about Turning Point that I think we all know. It's I can't say it's conservative because Trump is not, which is not the same as conservative. But we also know it's Christian. So it's Christian and MAGA. So I think I can perceive a Supreme Court case down the road at some point.
Well, yeah.
But if it was private money and it wasn't using government property or resources, It's not an issue. You could have high schoolers be in a MAGA club or a progressive club.
Well, there have certainly been, groups like, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes that would meet on campus, or groups like, and I think we can all agree that we would object to, say, NAMBLA having a chapter at a school. But,
Well, so that comes down to what is the authority of a school board?
Yeah.
There are school boards in every school district. Are they not allowed to set policy like that? Because it sounds like Greg Abbott is saying you're not allowed to. I'm going to dictate the policy.
Well, yeah. Of course, one problem also is that the schools aren't necessarily totally funded locally either. I mean, there's a lot of state money going to them. There's some of that gas tax money, for example. And there's certainly, I guess, so what would you do, for example, what do you think, about returning more autonomy to the school boards or to the local cities?
Well, I have a crazy idea. And we have a candidate for a state board of education that I met up. There was a voucher bill that passed in the session. So I'm in favor of school choice, and we probably want to see how that plays out. But if you ask me my dream, how to resolve this, it would be a statewide scholarship. A statewide scholarship would mean every single student would have the same amount of money to choose any school, including the government school. Meaning the government schools have to compete. They have to say, we want that student here. Here's what we're offering. What that would do is several things. It would address the Robin Hood issue. Here in Texas, we have this Robin Hood rule where you have to equalize funding. Well, you equalize funding instead of sending money to districts and taking out of wealthy districts and go to poor districts. So that resolves the equality issue. It also empowers teachers, because as long as the legislature and politicians are going to control the money and what districts get it, they're going to demand accountability. And the way they demand accountability is a statewide mandated test, which teachers hate. And that's a bad way to educate. The right way to educate is for schools to compete and teachers to be empowered so they use their talent their best. Right now, teachers in government schools really are not able to teach. It's prescribed by politicians. If we want to see education thrive, we want talented teachers to use their skills the best. So I think a statewide scholarship can address a lot of concerns about education.
Pat, I think that Robin Hood program is what cost Ann Richards her governorship back in 1994. Isn't that right? I mean, and then that was when we got Bush into the state house, and there hasn't been a blue governor in Texas ever since.
Right?
Yeah. So
well, of course the conservative wave and the Reagan Revolution had something to do with that. And it's also a result of Texas has always been, say, conservative, but conservative used to mean Democrat. They were the people for states' rights.
Yes, they were.
That changed as Democrats became more tax-friendly, spending-friendly, regulation-heavy.
Things have changed.
And Republicans look like the conservatives.
Yeah. And so from there, that brings up, one thing. What do you have to say, for example, about city autonomy? For example, for a while here, we did not have Uber and Lyft in Austin because there were some city regulations, and then the state overruled them. And and I sometimes like to think that, I don't live in the city of Austin right now, but when I was living in the city of Austin, it seemed like sometimes the state legislature overcorrected some of the really stupid things they did there. What do you think? Because the state said, well, let's make something that's more unified. So, so the Uber and Lyft drivers can drive anywhere in the state. What do you think about that? Say overriding the cities and things like that.
Well, at the risk of annoying conservatives and maybe some libertarians, I believe in local control. I do not want state or federal overreach. If you live in a city that does something you don't like, you do have recourse. You can move. If the entire state goes the wrong way, that's a harder move. And the entire United States goes the wrong way, what are your choices? So I think it's very important that the concept of federalism is maintained. At the federal level, we're supposed to have the 10th Amendment. Unfortunately, it hasn't worked well enough. We should have the same understanding between municipalities and state government. And I think if you have state government getting too far in the weeds here, so I'll give you an example. Anybody who's been in Austin knows there's a homeless problem. It's not as bad as San Francisco and Seattle and other places, but
we've even got homeless out in the suburbs too now, Pat.
Yeah. That is the responsibility of the municipality, the mayor, city council. They need to deal with that. Houston can do it their way. Austin can do it. Dallas. But I know recently Greg Abbott did something, and I remember reading this, and I didn't get the detail, but he tried to essentially mandate a policy for Austin's homeless. And I know Kirk Watson said, "What are you doing? I'm mayor here." So I do not think state government should be mandating policies like that. You can enable municipalities to do the right thing. There was a Supreme Court case that gave cities more authority to deal with the homeless issue. But regardless of what the issue is, there needs to be a clear understanding that state has certain enumerated powers, and you cannot enforce certain mandates that are local control.
Yes, of course. We did have some situations. I know, for example, where a fire was started under one of the highways, and that actually they actually had to shut down one of the highways for a while, which doesn't just affect people in Austin.
Well, the highway is probably if it was I-35, that's federal. Yeah. If it's a state road, it's a state road.
Well, I think, yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I'm just saying it wasn't, even though it's within the city limits, it wasn't necessarily a local issue. I know in some states, there's cases also where the cities actually try to draw their boundaries so the big highways are not in the city. So, for example, they don't have to do snow removal and stuff like that. Yeah, that's another thing too, Pat. What do you have to say, for example, about our electrical grid and stuff like that? Because it's been almost 5 years ago, but you were living here when we had the deep freeze, and I got to tell you that almost made me embarrassed to live in this state. And since we're both from up north, we know how people up north handle things. I mean, you're wearing a Miami, Ohio University shirt right now. I'm wearing a
yes, I am.
The deep freeze that hit Texas would have maybe stopped people up there for a couple hours, and then everything would have went back to normal. But down here we have power outages. We had roads frozen for 4 or 5 days. I mean, what can you say about things like that? Because that is something that does fall under the governor. snow or just overall disaster relief.
Right. So I could spend a lot of time talking about this, but I'll try to be concise. One of the most important duties of the governor of Texas is emergency response.
Yeah.
So there's so many things that the president of the United States can do, or governors in other states can do, that the governor of Texas can't do because the lieutenant governor is elected, the agriculture commissioner is elected, the attorney general is elected. So the governor has limited responsibility overall, but emergency response is one of the most important. And most people regard Abbott as doing a bad job of emergency response. A lot of emergency response is planning in advance in conducting drills.
Yeah.
So that when you get to the actual emergency, you know what to do. The I don't know how many of your listeners are in state versus out of state, but Texas is unique that we have our own electrical grid.
Yes.
It's
covered by that grid.
It's the Texas grid.
Yeah, El Paso. I know El Paso is not part of that grid, but a large portion of Texas is part of that grid. Yes.
And what manages that grid is the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, ERCOT.
Yes, ERCOT.
They are the ones who say, we're managing the grid, and because of that, they're also managing the energy generation because they have to say who's on and who's off, who's connected, who's not connected. All right. So there's two parts of that. You cannot just turn on electric generation at a facility. Let's say you're burning natural gas. If you need natural gas, it's going to take hours from that thing being cold to actually spinning a turbine. So you have to have spinning reserve. Okay. You have to have what's online right now, but you also need facilities that are running but not connected. That's called spinning reserve. So you need to maintain that. But a lot of what was the problem there is there's something called electrical heat trace. If you go to facilities up in the north, they will have electrical cable that is just running current to keep things warm. So valves will open. They won't freeze shut. A lot of that we didn't have here in Texas, and it should have had. So in that particular case, that's a lot of what happened is just not being prepared, not having the spinning reserve.
Yeah. Okay. So who are some people in Texas government that you think are pretty decent? I mean, I don't know, people that I think are, they're not necessarily libertarians, but they're close enough. I mean, I like Bob Hall. I like Shelley Luther. Those are two people that are in the legislature. Of course, I like Shelley Luther, because she got arrested for opening her hair salons, but and I did have Susanna Gracia Hupp on here once because she's just I think a gun rights advocate who, in my opinion, really made a difference. But who are some good people in Texas, Pat?
Well, one of them that has been pretty friendly to the Libertarian Party is Susan Eckert. She's a state senator.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Sarah Eckert, you mean?
Or Sarah Eckert. Sorry, I called her Susan, but Sarah Eckert. So she's a Texas senator who said she was going to run for Congress. Now she's running for comptroller. So she may go up against Huffines.
Yeah. There's also Christy Craddock is also in that race, I believe. Yes.
I don't really know that much about Christy Craddock because when Mark Miller ran for railroad commissioner as a libertarian, I think Christy Craddock might have been his Republican opponent. But with Eckhart, you're not going to find too many pure libertarians in Texas.
Yeah.
elected government, but she at least recognized that when Republicans put a filing fee on our candidates for a primary that we're not allowed to participate in, that's
Yes.
wrong. And when the money goes to the general revenue of the state, that's wrong. So she would stand up for us and work with us. So I appreciate that. And I've had conversations with her where I think there's some common ground.
Yes, for people outside of Texas, uh, to run for a statewide office, it's $3,750. The red and blue candidates pay that money, and then the money goes back to the party to run conventions or whatever. But for other parties, they pay that money, but then it just goes right into the state general fund. So we are actually subsidizing them. And this is one thing that we can all work together on. Those of us who are not part of the duopoly. Yeah. So, Pat, obviously Texas has a long border. What do you think about what's been going on with immigration right now? I won't be surprised if there's eventually that there might be a Fort Sumter situation happening between, say, state police and the military, or ICE and the state police in one of these states sometime.
Well, okay, I have a lot to say about this, but I'll try to be concise.
Yeah.
I'll start with this. I think when I see Tom Holman, I think he's like Dick Butkus. Dick Butkus was what?
Who is that? Yeah.
Tom Holman is Trump's border czar.
Okay.
He's the guy. So Kristi Noem gets a lot of the attention, but Tom Holman is the guy who's actually kind of running the show. All right. By the way, he's the guy that there's evidence he received $50,000 in a paper bag as a bribe. But anyway, when I see him, I think he's like Dick Butkus. Dick Butkus was one of the greatest linebackers in the history of football. He destroyed people. He hit people hard. He was tough. If you're a football coach, you want that guy as your linebacker. But you have to tell him, don't hit somebody who's out of bounds. Don't hit somebody after the whistle. The problem with Tom Holman is his head coach is Donald Trump. And I don't think Donald Trump cares whether people are getting hit, whether they're inbounds or after the whistle. So that's what I see happening. They can say that they have improved the border situation in terms of people entering. I think they can make that claim. They can't say they're doing it the right way. So in terms of Texas, I go back to the Michael Badnarik campaign when we said the problem is people are breaking the law because it's easier to swim the Rio Grande than climb the mountain of paperwork. We want peaceful, productive people.
Yeah.
If you're peaceful, productive, welcome. The paperwork is the problem. And I know there's been attempts federally in the past, and it hasn't gone anywhere. But I think as a border state, we should advocate for a reasonable border policy. We want the talent around the world that'll help us grow. We don't want to close the border. And I close the conversation with this. What is an open border? If you listen to Trump, anyone who disagrees with his policy wants open borders. We have never had an open border in the United States. An open border is if your front door is wide open and somebody can raid your refrigerator, sleep in your bed, trash the place, that's an open border. If the door's closed and the doorbell rings and it's your neighbor, and you say, hey, come on in and have a beer, let's watch TV, That's not an open border.
Yeah.
If the door's closed and somebody breaks through your window, that's not an open border. Okay? You can talk about putting bars on the windows and enforcing that better. Now, if somebody rings your doorbell and they're a big guy covered in blood with an axe, you're not going to let that person in.
Yeah.
We have never had an open border. I don't know anybody, with the exception of there's some anarchist type people who advocate that position, but let's at least recognize nobody is talking about an open border. It's a rational border. And if we want to grow, we want the talent from around the world coming here.
Yeah. And, and sometimes, it's just cases of people coming to visit families or, I knew a guy who was living in Peru and he wanted to bring his Peruvian girlfriend to his dad's funeral. He couldn't bring her in, even though he was an American citizen. But Pat, there's another thing too is it an open border if you put a big sign outside your house that says free food or free money? Is that an open border?
Well,
I don't know if it's, I'd say it might be because it's certainly an invitation.
Okay, if you're saying if I have a sanctuary.
If I put up a sign outside my house and it says free money.
Then that's not a border.
Yeah, that's not a border. Yeah.
That's not a border at all. You're being a philanthropist. You're helping people out.
So why are we talking about my point is, Pat, why are we talking about putting locks on the doors and putting bars on the windows and putting security guards by the door? And why don't we just take down the sign that says free money?
Oh, I see your point. Okay.
I mean, what can you, as governor, what can you do about all these free, how many immigrants will we have if there isn't all this free stuff for them?
I don't know if there's much as governor, because a lot of that is federal policy, but I want to address that in two parts. Of course, we're libertarians, so we don't believe in the idea of taxing people to just hand out money. Okay? So if libertarians ran things, you wouldn't have that in the first place. Right? But I have to say, most of the research I've seen from Cato, Reason, and others, people are not coming here because there's free stuff. I'm sure it happens. They're coming here because they want jobs. They want to be working in the restaurants, working in the fields. That's what they want. And there's argument that they are paying their taxes. Those people who are here illegally are actually paying taxes.
Yeah, it's really hard to tell, Pat, because I don't hardly trust anybody on any side of this whole immigration debate. I certainly don't trust the people who constantly complain about the immigrants. But it seems like a lot of people have other agendas. One thing that I do think is problematic is EMTALA, which is that law that requires hospitals to treat anybody who shows up. I mean, I would not object to a hospital turning away illegal immigrants. I don't think very many hospitals would, but I think hospitals should have a right to turn people away, and that's free. In a way, that is free stuff, because sometimes it's not directly coming from the government, but it's coming from the government gives money to groups like Catholic Charities, and then Catholic Charities is giving free stuff away. Yeah, and I should bring up too. This is something that falls under the purview of the state government. You hear stories about illegal immigrants getting CDLs, which is kind of commercial driver's licenses, which I kind of got a problem with that. I mean, I don't know if they should be allowed to get special privileges that aren't accorded to everything. And getting a CDL is a little bit more than getting a driver's license, and you do have great responsibility when you have a CDL, especially if you're driving an 18-wheeler.
Well, I think I could make the argument you shouldn't get any driver's license of any kind if you're if you're here illegally.
Yeah.
and you're seeking some government approval,
Yeah.
shouldn't be able to get it. Uh, I think clearly, uh, I know Trump and Stephen Miller are probably trying to deport everybody,
Yeah.
but I don't think you're going to be able to deport everybody.
I don't think so
I
either.
think George W. Bush had a better approach. Let's recognize there's people here illegally. Let's bring them out in the open. I know it's not fair to have people jump the line, but they got in.
Yeah,
They're
well,
here.
and they're also turning it into an industry all its own, Pat. I mean, it's I mean, there's a difference between, there's a difference between slamming the door in somebody's face and telling them to go away. I mean, I don't grab the person and then put the person in a dungeon in my house for 6 months. I mean, that's a little bit different. I mean, it's there's a lot of corruption involved here, and it's really kind of sickening. But obviously there's a lot of, there are a lot of different. This is a very detailed argument. I think a lot of people have different visions of what they exactly want here. And of course. And being in Texas, I'm more upset. I'm much more upset about all the people who came here from California. I mean, I have that shirt that says, you get a lot of people coming into your neighborhood. It does change things. So, but that does bring, what would you do, for example, as governor? Could you also say, for example, nullify all drug laws in the state of Texas?
I'd like to. I'd like to end the war on drugs. I'm not just talking about marijuana. So I will give Greg Abbott credit for vetoing Dan Patrick's bill that would have banned THC, but they called it the hemp bill because that's how extreme it was. But now my understanding is Mitch McConnell slipped that into the continuing resolution, which essentially federalized what Dan Patrick was trying to do. I don't have to spend any effort convincing libertarians that the war on drugs failed. So that's my position.
Also, and I don't know, would the governor, for example, have the power to suspend all executions? I mean,
no.
And then just change them all to life imprisonment or not?
No. So the governor has no
executions while you're governor, but
So the governor of Texas does not have any pardon powers, or you have to go to the board of pardons. With Robert Robertson as governor, I hope he's still alive, but if I get elected next year, I hope he's still alive. I would go to the board of pardons and say, either exonerate or investigate. The result of that is either he's freed or you have to provide some actual evidence, because all the evidence I've seen clearly exonerates him.
I'll explain for people who might not know. The Robert Roberson case the man was convicted of murder, for shaking a baby, which they've now found that is a questionable, that really doesn't kill kids. So there's a lot of reasonable doubts about the case of Robert Roberson, but he was on death row and he was scheduled to be executed. A bunch of us made noise, and we got that execution delayed, and hopefully we can maybe, my hope is that he gets another trial, and
in my opinion, I don't think another trial is even needed. I think he should be exonerated. But I'll mention,
I might exonerate him, but I'm just
So I'll mention that one of the reasons he was convicted is when the arresting officer went to the hospital and he saw that Robert Roberson was informed his daughter died, he had no emotional response. Well, the reason is he has Asperger's. That was never brought up in trial. Now the arresting officer is seeking the exoneration because he is aware that what he saw was not because the guy lacked emotion, it's because he had that condition.
Yeah.
So
I'm not going to judge somebody for their reaction to a death, especially the death of a child. Some people will react that way. They'll just go completely stone faced. It's just the way and maybe they might go somewhere privately and just bawl their eyes out. It really, yeah. But anyway, do we have any other really egregious cases, or is he just the only one we can think about? I mean, Texas.
Oh, there's a number of them. What was the one that Malcolm Gladwell talked about, where the girl was pulled over, put in prison, and committed suicide? I forget her name, but there are a number of examples. Actually, here in Lago Vista, we had the Atwater case, which went to the Supreme Court, where a lady was put in a jail cell because her kid didn't have a seatbelt on.
Jeez.
Yeah, but the fundamental issue is the tough on crime, where you have mandatory minimums, where even the judge says, I hate to do this, but I have to sentence you to a long term. There needs to be rationality. You can't just be a tough on crime person and think you're serving the law. We need to make sure that justice is appropriate and the person really is guilty.
Well, Pat, you've now segued me into another issue I want to bring up, and that's the issue of child protective services. I mean, you're older than I am. I can remember, as a child, being left in the car with the motor running. Nobody arrested my mom for that, and now we have this ridiculously absurd. There was when we had our county convention 2 years ago, there was a sign in the Austin Library that I took a picture of and says, "Nobody under 10 is allowed in the Austin Library by themselves." I went to the library in my hometown when I was by myself, probably when I was 7 years old. All these cases that are just kids being kids. Now parents are expected to watch their kids 24/7. They can't even send them out to the grocery store to get a gallon of milk without somebody calling the cops.
You're right. So child abuse is a concern. And of course, if there's real child abuse,
yes,
those children have to be taken where they can be not abused. But I think there are cases that step way over the line. And again, I may sound like I'm ducking the question all the time, but I understand the limits of what the governor can and can't do. That's a legislative matter. The governor can lead, but it's up to the legislature to address what those statutes are.
Yeah. I don't know if these are. I guess these are mostly county agencies or state agencies. But yes. I guess what other things what are some other issues that I haven't mentioned that you might want to discuss?
Well, I'll finish with this one, and if maybe this can be the last one. We opened by talking about how the Libertarians have to pay these fees because Republicans are trying to take us off the ballot.
Yes.
The fundamental issue is how we vote. The way we vote is what is, I call it single choice. So imagine there's a city council election in Austin, and there are 10 people who want to run for precinct 3. You can only choose one of those 10. What the result of that is nobody will win, so it'll go to a runoff. So the number of people who vote in the runoff election is a very small number, and those are the people who choose. That's bad, but that's not the worst part of it. The worst part of it is the incentive system, where if you only have one choice, every politician has to say, "I'm great. Everyone else is stupid, evil, and idiot." There is no reward for for finding common ground. I'll mention that the city of Austin voted several years ago to adopt ranked choice voting so that they would be able to address this. The state of Texas won't let them. Now, I prefer approval voting. Either one is an improvement over single choice.
Yes.
What I would like to see, and this also gets to the gerrymandering thing, where the president can call the governor and he will hold a special session hostage to rig the next congressional election.
Yeah.
With approval voting, you don't need that. Everybody gets to express, here are these 10 candidates running for city council. Yes. I like this one. I like this one too. Maybe all the rest of them suck, or everybody's good except this one. You get to express that. When we use it in the Libertarian Party all the time, it works. Typically, on the first ballot, you have a winner, and there's benefit to finding common ground. So I would like to see municipalities have the ability to use alternative voting systems, and I think that's going to help everybody down the line. When people see how well it works, it will become that's how Texas will vote, and that's how the United States will vote.
And I'm partial to star voting, Pat. You know, Pat, I should ask you this at the beginning too, and I don't know why I didn't figure this. How did you become a libertarian?
I had to take so when I was at Miami University.
Yes.
Even though I was studying engineering, they have to ensure that you're taking other courses. So it has to be a liberal arts. So I took a course in philosophy. Professor said that I sounded like a libertarian. I didn't know what that meant, and I read the book by John Hospers, and that's what happened.
John Hospers, yes, and you know, I gotta say also, you know, everybody who has ever went to school at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, raves about it because it has got to be the prettiest college campus anywhere. It is just a beautiful place.
I get to go there every spring. I'm chair of the academic committee there, so I get to go to campus every year.
And you know, and of course that was where, and of course we can also, you know, brag about Big Ben, Ben Roethlisberger, that great graduate. Of course, Miami's had a few good, not as many football players as that other Miami, but they've had some good football players coming out of that Miami too. Yeah.
Yep.
They were the Redskins. They're the Red Hawks now, I believe. So yes.
We're the Red Hawks. Yep.
Yep. They wanted to be politically correct. So yeah, it's yeah. Pat, are you from Ohio originally, or you're from Pittsburgh, right? Or
I was born in Pittsburgh. Grew up near Cleveland. I went to high school near Dayton, and then when I graduated from Miami, I went to Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah.
Was in Maine, Richmond, Virginia, and then Texas.
Oh, you've definitely been around. And you know, it's funny how, yeah. And we're both Steeler fans, you know, so that's why we also love Ben Roethlisberger. But yeah, that's even though you had to live in Cleveland for a while, you know,
yeah.
But even worse, you're down in Miami. You had to live in Bengal country. But oh well. I usually root for the Browns when they're playing the Steelers. In fact, I hate the Bengals the most, I have to admit. But but it's been great having you on here, Pat.
Thank you very much, Chris. I really appreciate it, and just want to remind everybody my website is patdixon.org, patdixon.org.
Yes, patdixon.org. Yes, and hopefully we'll see you run for governor, Pat, and we might see some other things happen too. It's going to be very interesting. And of course, yeah, that's right. You were also on the Badnarik panel too, so that was.
Yep.
Pat was also on we had a panel discussion after Michael Badnarik died, and Pat was there to honor Michael Badnarik. So Pat's definitely got a history in the party, and he's worn a lot of different hats. And so thank you, Pat. I'm
all right, Chris.
Please
you take it easy.
Like the show. Subscribe to my channel. Go check out my Substack. by my I'm Chris Baker. We're out